Kuzangpla and welcome to the Bhutan This Week, our weekly news magazine program. First, the top stories this week. His Majesty the King arrives in Thimphu after tour of southern districts. The Health Ministry launches its flagship program. And people living with disabilities continue to face challenges in participating during elections. And now the details. His Majesty the King entered into 7-day facility quarantine on Tuesday, having arrived in Thimphu from a tour of the southern districts. During the tour, which began on 1st March, His Majesty travelled to Tongsa, Gilifu, Samtsi, Tendruk, Tashichiling, Gomtu and Phintsiling and met with COVID-19 task force teams, government officials, health workers, desubs and other people working in the front lines in these places.
His Majesty thanked everyone for having worked diligently so far to contain the pandemic and to address the issues caused by it to the people, pointing out that this represents one of the greatest adversities we face as a nation in modern times. His Majesty also encouraged the different frontline teams to remain vigilant as they continue to serve the nation. While in Phintsiling on 7th and 8th March, His Majesty visited areas close to the international border, the Amuchu Boulder Export Containment Facility, MDP, Ale Land Customs Checkpoint and Pasaga Dry Port, which is under construction. His Majesty granted separate audiences to the Southern COVID-19 Task Force, Phintsiling Hospital staff and Phintsiling Tungkak officials. En route to Phintsiling from Samtsi earlier, His Majesty visited the various points of entries at the border surveilled by teams of desubs along with personnel from the armed forces and government agencies. His Majesty granted audiences to the staff of Gomtu Hospital and the Gomtu COVID-19 Sub-Task Force and other officials in Gomtu. While in Samtsi on 5th and 6th March, His Majesty granted audiences to the Samtsi COVID-19 Task Force and other public servants in the Dzongkhag, the staff of Samtsi Hospital and the desubs of the 44th Batch Accelerator Training Program in Tendu and Tashichiling. His Majesty also visited the Gelsung site under development in Jamsuling. On 4th March, His Majesty granted audiences to the Gilifu COVID-19 Task Force and other officials, Gilifu Hospital staff and desubs of the 44th Batch Accelerator Training Program in Jimiling and Pelithang. His Majesty visited the border, the Gelsung site under development in Tarithang and proposed sites for upcoming Desung National Service water projects while in Gilifu. His Majesty thanked the desubs training for the 44th Batch in 4 different sites for their volunteerism at a time when the country needed them the most.
And then, of course, my Mami police that Nahi Chekochichi, Tuje Trotik de Toro, Kachumebo Chelu Ginkudi, the trick the trick de USA. The Jem Romami Sudamel, Che Malomle Konlongol, Che Neso Jableke Konyanimi.
The 44th Batch Accelerator Training Program began on 14th February in 7 different centers across the country simultaneously. 1,751 men and women participated in the program and after concluding their training on 5th March have taken the total number of desubs in the country to 2,099. His Majesty granted audiences to the desubs at training centers in Tenchuling, Paro, Shaba and Chuka in February. His Royal Highness Prince Jigalugan Wangchuk, who has been in Gilifu as Ketchup, accompanied His Majesty during the tour. The Economic Affairs Minister accompanied His Majesty in Samtsi, joined by the Works and Human Settlement Minister in Phintsiling. Sonamongdi for BBS News.
The Indian government handed over a grant of more than 1.2 billion yuan to the Bhutanese government. The funds are budgetary support for 11 project-tied assistance projects of the 12th five-year plan. The grant will be used for projects in various areas such as health, education and culture, among others. According to the Gross National Happiness Commission, the funds will be used in ongoing projects such as construction of zongs, infrastructure for central schools and colleges. Bhutan has been talking about women empowerment for years and many agencies are working towards it, but it looks like more needs to be done. During the recent Women's Leadership Summit to observe International Women's Day, many called for more support to help women.
Today, only 15% of the women are at the executive level, including the specialists in the civil service and the parliament, and the number is low. Many attributed it to the social, cultural and economic norms of the society. The summit recommended a family support network and the establishment of the Ministry of Women and Children.
It was during the executive meeting, and why I touch on executive because I feel it's the executives who need to take the lead. So we were having this meeting and on the sidelines, coffee break, Tashu tells me, why? You have, he was actually saying, raising a concern about a culture officer that was sent to his Zongkabra. Female, okay? So then some others joined and they're saying, yeah, impaired problem, all this. So I said, okay, what is your main issue? Just share, no? So then they were saying, oh, maternity leave na jo, chirula ben mitsube, rural na tamachin problem do, no.
What can we do to support young women? We've heard a lot about the need for mentorship, for the need for role models, maybe very specific forums and networks. I think this is again something that we need to work on. But ultimately, I think we do need to be able to institutionalize some of these solutions. So for example, the RMA and the financial institutions, I'm not sure. I need to go back and see how many young mothers we have. Is there a need to have a crash?
I think what is important is that there isn't an empowered, strong institution that can take this forward. Before I left, the discussions with the Cabinet and the Royal Civil Service Commission and the Planning Commission was that the NCWC will be delinked from the civil service as an independent, autonomous rights body, becoming watchdog to the government, and the government will establish a Ministry of Women and Children.
Competing into the world of in the labor market and also in the civil service equally with men. So firstly, there are reasons related to stereotypical norms and practices, and also if you look at occupations outside of civil service, there are technical fields and there is very clear gender segregation of occupations and jobs, which leaves the girls with little choice to get into.
The National Commission for Women and Children will discuss the recommendations further with other relevant agencies. They said it is important to offer women every support because the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. Shingzam, BBS News.
The Health Ministry launched the Health Flagship Program and its blueprint and guidelines in Mongar on Tuesday. The program, which is an initiative of the government, aims to take all basic diagnostic services to the people's doorsteps.
The Health Flagship Program, in particular, will focus on the prevention, early screening and treatment of breast, cervical and stomach cancers. Towards this end, the government procured and set up additional endoscopy machines to detect stomach cancer in hospitals across the country. The ministry also plans to put in place human papillomavirus or HPV testing kits to detect cervical cancer and mammogram facilities, which is using a machine designed to look at breast tissues in the regional and district hospitals. Along with the flagship program, the health blueprint was also released.
Gutsuna vengache amslistine simpemo tonime sishidola.
Rangira taksibe, rangira nao chau te mathe me hemala rang majo kana ro menchin mare di dumo te ane te bego bigite nami same khachu di te yera yi seshuni la.
The government approved 1.3 million Ngultram for the health flagship program in November 2019. Meanwhile, the health minister, who is on tour to the eastern districts, also visited the Eastern COVID-19 hospital in Mongar and met with the district COVID-19 task force. For Sonam Sering in Mongar, Yisha Gelson, BBS News.
The 21st Century Economic Roadmap aims to achieve a high-income nation status for the country by 2030. This will be accomplished if the gross national per capita income or the average gross yearly income earned by each person is more than $12,000. According to the draft report, to achieve the high-income nation status, the country's annual investment requirement could reach as high as 1,500 billion Ngultram over the next 10 years.
The draft report of the 21st Century Economic Roadmap was presented to the government last month. The draft provides strategic plans to prioritize economic development for the next 10 years. Various issues and intervention are identified through two tracks: enablers and drivers. The four enablers such as energy, technology, health and capital will provide a platform for economic activities to thrive. Meanwhile, 5 identified drivers, which are construction, manufacturing, agriculture, cottage and small industries, and tourism, have the potential to accelerate economic growth and create gainful employment.
Which means increasing probably the GDP level from the current about 300 billion Ngultram to almost 700 to 800 billion Ngultram per annum. A lot of people are a little surprised that our GNI per capita income, we are aiming at a high income society. We feel that this is doable because of already what our successful sectors are doing. For example, hydropower, and of course, unfortunately, tourism has been mostly impacted during the current COVID crisis, but otherwise tourism has been doing extremely well.
Experts from various fields such as business, economy, technology, and entrepreneurship took part in drafting the report. The government will deliberate further and endorse the report for implementation. This is Kaldang Chodin for BBS News.
Waste management is a mounting problem at Punakha's crematorium, and the problem only becomes grave with a lone caretaker. Located centrally, the number of people using the facility has increased in recent years, and according to the caretaker, this means more work for him.
48-year-old Dawa Nurbu Sherpa has been the crematorium's caretaker for over a decade now. He volunteered to manage the crematorium, although he joined as a sweeper for the Punakha Zong. Today, from cleaning to ensuring safety at the facility, Dawa does it all by himself. He even placed dustbins at various locations.
I burn the dry waste dumped here since the garbage truck does not come. However, I segregate the bottles and keep them in one place. The district municipal is supposed to send the dumpster. Here, the dustbins are filled fast when there are 12 to 13 bodies being cremated, and there's no place to dump the waste.
But despite his every effort, waste is seen scattered all over the area. The leftover food thrown in open spaces, the water taps often left open, and the toilets blocked.
I cleaned the toilets yesterday, but people are irresponsible when using it. Despite having water inside, people use bottles, which they throw in the toilet pots. This blocks the pipes. I have to clear everything while cleaning. It would be better if people use water instead of other objects.
ngana duty chape dauji de chi jodo mula te dauji su da de atara de chapni mi chete chete phoni dauchi na lo ta cha ji de chi ani phobi kap su de nga changi ge gar de sa che on sa ma thongla den chapsa de ma palle ra da lalin thabra ma chuppe te the chulalin thabe wachin de anim jikangil meteni me the chudi de du the chulalin ma thaba anjum shin de su mo ka chukuchi da anjum sata gi chala de su lalin thabbe te la ansugi chapsa ikangil ane be thendi du tanga chapsa duty phob de lo chapsa bera me sube chapsa dam dan sara de do.
Tired of managing the crematorium alone, Dawa even requested the district administration to transfer him back to the Punakha zone.
Tore nawa mi no ji nawa mi na se thun ane be telen chada jam mi chibe mi chanyam ko ita kola ma onku be kopsun koma nga chada dandara ge khuba jokola te telen khora chi gi changye di tsale ya malo to mi phido chira be tigi tsale ya lo mo suba te kangi chesho dra ni la ta timu zum ji be bajin mi dun de chi du se te nga chi na be bajin mi chira i me se timu zum ji mi shu mi chi da ni mi ni de chi be re te chi 나로 힘상습에 자수에 생아 로치 수위라 말로
다야루 창에 둘렌기 테카디 같이 홀레 잡초 수분 피서서 유스니빌라 다 날레파 배워진 둘렌 베미데다 다야기 창에 다즈 베미니 레진베 칼랍시나 드세 치텐 또또조시나베 잡초 분위기 저와데 유라나 미토 라마스위 강엘 유세 같이루 간에 예주마 히스니빌라 다 바이마바 미토 말라미기 강gel레 틴 로치 배워진다 조카킹으로 이토구베라 꾀디 오마진 대 조카기 가들 잡죠 시범 베니기네 미스션이빌라.
The Dzongkhag also plans to carry out some minor maintenance at the crematorium. Meanwhile, for Dawa, he can only hope a helping hand is sent soon, or if not, too much to ask, expect the users to develop a civic sense. For Changadoji in Wandifora, Sangishazon for BBS News.
Thimphu still needs more buses to improve its city bus services. This was highlighted in the first edition of the Bhutan Journal of Management. The Royal Institute of Management recently published the journal that contains research papers, review articles and case studies related to all aspects of public policy and management within the Bhutanese context.
As per the research findings, there are currently over 40 city buses in the capital. However, these are not enough during the rush hours. Most respondents for the study said it is difficult to find a seat during such times. The traffic congestion in Thimphu has been worsening gradually with the increasing population and private car ownership in the town.
The result showed that availability of schedule and maps at bus stops, ease of purchasing tickets, timetable of services, driver attitude and responsiveness of city bus staff were all managed well. On the other hand, there were not enough bus services and seats during rush hours. The study recommends that there is need of more buses on the routes to ply with dedicated lanes and routes. And there is a need of enhancement and revamp of main city bus terminal.
Regular users of the city bus service shared a similar view. We do not get a seat during rush hours, and it is expensive for us to use taxi services. It would be better if the number of buses is increased along with its movement frequency.
We use the city bus service while visiting the town or the hospital because it is more convenient. Even for students, using city buses is better. The fare is reasonable compared to a taxi. It is the cheapest and the most convenient choice for us. However, if we arrive late at the terminal, the seats would be full and we have to stand and travel.
It is comfortable traveling in city buses because it is cheaper than taxis. However, at times it is difficult to get a seat. The city bus service manager said 19 more buses will be added to its fleet in the next few years.
Our plan is to start a new route system whereby the trunk lane will be starting from Babisa Zerul to going all the way up to Dichinjalingla, but it will be going by Georgina Pamsola. There will be about 17 buses plying on that route. And then we have the feeder routes, the subsidiary routes from where the small buses will cater to the main trunk lane. For the trunk lane buses not to go empty, the subsidiary lane buses will feed the trunk lane buses.
The office is also planning to increase the movement of its buses.
As per the new plan, the buses will be plying on the route continuously. So that way, people do not have to come to the terminal. So what is happening now is that people tend to come to the terminal so that they can get a seat on the bus. Because from the terminal, the bus gets full. And then if you wait at a stop, you don't get a seat on the bus.
Regarding the introduction of a bus rapid transit system or dedicated lanes for buses, the Thomde and the city bus service said there is no such plan. However, the Thomde intends to study the option. Kiladim for BBS News.
The Tashigang District Court upheld the judgment of the Wamrung Dungka Court on the Wamrung battery and trespassing case on Tuesday. In July last year, the Dungka Court had sentenced Sring Yanki, the woman who appealed to the District Court, to 18 months concurrent prison term. She was convicted of battery and trespassing. The court also ordered her to pay more than 260,000 yutum as compensation to the victim. Meanwhile, the Dungka court had acquitted the victim and her son, who were accused of assault. The incident happened on 26 April last year outside the victim's house in Wamrung. 2 policemen and 2 Desups were attacked by miscreants near the Pemaling outpost in Phuntsling early Tuesday morning. One of the policemen was injured after a miscreant slashed at him with a knife. The incident took place while the team was patrolling the area. As per sources, the team chased away the 4 men with their sticks who fled across the border. Now, most of us have the right to vote and take part in the country's democratic processes, but people with disabilities have a different story to tell due to lack of disabled-friendly registrations and voting process. This is as per a research on challenges that persons with disabilities face in a meaningful participation in elections in Bhutan. The Bhutan Journal of Management published the research recently.
Everyone in this group is people with disabilities, and most of them are eligible voters. But when it comes to voting, challenges are plenty.
We can
reach the polling booth, but once we get inside, it is difficult to vote for the right candidate. We cannot see their picture. It will be helpful if the Election Commission could provide the names and details in Braille.
It was difficult to understand the words on the voting forms, but it was not an issue while voting since I could see the picture of the candidates and vote accordingly. Our teachers interpreted the information on elections and candidates aired on BBS.
Being a Bhutanese, I wanted to vote, so went to the polling station. But after I reached the polling station, I had to climb steps till the booth. There was no one to help me or carry me. I was disappointed when I could not vote. I felt left out.
The biggest challenge right now is people who are using wheelchair or wheelchair users and those who are hearing impaired. They were saying that during the election campaign, they were not able to get the information from the candidates, what their pledges were, so therefore they had some issues. If BBS could mobilize some interpreter or sign language interpreter so that they can also get the information, and those who are in wheelchair had the problem with the accessibility or physical accessibility.
According to the research, the participation of persons with disabilities in an election process is essential to ensure their political rights are exercised. The research recommended using Braille and pictographs. It also suggested the need to improve the physical accessibility of polling stations. These pictures are from the polling station in Thimphu in 2018. Meanwhile, the Election Commission said they are making a separate voters list of persons with disabilities. The Commission is also planning mobile polling stations, but there is no plan to incorporate Braille for now. The officials said they are exploring all measures to improve the election process for them. For the upcoming Thomde elections, the ECB is requesting their guardians to help with the registration. According to the Population and Housing Census 2017, there are around 16,000 people with disabilities, and that is quite a number to decide an outcome of an election. Kilidem for BBS News.
After waiting for more than 3 years, landowners in Outso of Flunse have finally been given the go-ahead to start construction works. However, this decision has left more than 30 families in a dilemma. They have been living on those private lands on lease till now and are worried since they have nowhere else to go once the construction begins there.
After the plan to establish a satellite down in Outso was approved in 2017, 34 households had to vacate their homes the next year. They moved onto private lands owned by 14 individuals. They say they were told by officials who could return to their old places once the developmental works are finished. But more than 3 years on and works are still ongoing. Now, with the landowners told they can start construction on their own, the families who had been living there are worried they will have to vacate soon. But with no place to go, they are appealing to the government for help.
Once the private landholders begin construction of houses, we don't know where to go. The private landholders are seeking approval from the Dzongkhag to start the construction work, which they are yet to get.
The little amounts we saved have all been spent while shifting our home, and most of the town planning activities has not yet started. During the recent meeting, we were told that Dzongkhag has started to approve the construction work for private landholders.
I
thought of applying for a leased land from the government. It is inconvenient without a proper home to stay. It is difficult to stay on private land since we have to vacate when the landowner asks us to vacate.
An appeal letter was also put up with the Dzongkhag administration, but they say there has been no response yet. The Lhunsi Zonda says the 34 families will also be allotted plots in Outso once they receive approval from the National Land Commission. However, the office says they cannot help them in finding temporary places to live in.
If you allocate certain government plot for an individual to stay until that plot, the new town is ready, then it is very difficult for these people, for the government to later move them. Then they'll be staying there, and even if they can, they are not able to move. And so, but as an individual, you should also take responsibility. So that's why. But during those discussions, everybody agreed that they'll do it themselves.
So far, only the demarcation works and road constructions have been completed in the new town. The issue was also discussed during the recent Dzongkhag Thokdu. It has been forwarded to the Parliament and National Land Commission for review. For Sonam Tsring in Hunse, this is Kalzang Chodan for BBS News.
And this brings us to the end of this edition of the Bhutan This Week. Until next time, I'm Cheku, signing off. On for now.